The Sunday Ramble episode 2, where I talk about largely how the commies are taking over and people forgot that we need to stop them. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and a few things have been milling over in my thought. The way that I'm doing these Sunday Ramble things is that I'm going to be talking about 3 different bullet points that I have in my head that I have set, and I'm just going to touch upon them in sequential order. And that's how I do them. And the first one that I came up with has to do with systemic racism and this concept. Because I actually am one of the people that, although I think that SJWs get it wrong, 98% of the time, like almost 98% of the things that they say about systemic racism and how white people have all this privilege and blah, 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 they're mostly just not right at all. I think that people have circumstantial privileges. I think that being white is better in most instances, but I also don't think that it's a privilege in most instances if you actually look into the definition of the word privilege, which means something given exclusively to one group. And there's not a whole lot of that for white people at all, period. I think that maybe there's some private country clubs or something that don't really ever accept memberships from people who aren't white. I don't know. I've heard of such things, and I think that they take black guests, but black people can never be members of the clubs. That's about the last thing I've heard of that might be like this. Other than that, it's not just that things have kind of changed, but the exact opposite tends to be the case. So underrepresented minorities like Black and Latino and Native American and Middle Eastern people tend to, in many ways, in many instances, systemically be advantaged and given actual privileges. There is affirmative action hiring that is exclusively given to members of these types of groups on occasion, and scholarships and things like that. So, I was mulling over in my head this concept, and I realized that I actually had a video about this that I made over a year ago, and I messed up in the video. I went and I listened to it. The video is called, the difference between, wait, what is that video called? Something about, the different types of racism or something. I don't remember actually anymore what that video is called. I think it might be the difference between systemic, institutional, and structural racism. And I messed up on the phraseology, the terms, the words I used to describe these things. When I said structural, I meant to say institutional and vice versa. And it's kind of a shame that I just got the semantics wrong. I was still drinking at that time, and I was somewhat less careful with my wording. Because the thing is, we don't currently have almost any institutional racism. Institutional would imply that there's actually something that you can look at in our legal wording of things that is, somehow discriminatory towards any group. And the only thing that you could point to that's like that is anti-white and maybe anti-Asian. Those are the only systemic racism, institutional racism. Systemic is a lot more vague of a term, and it can apply to a lot of different things. But yeah, institutional racism actually penalizes white people at the moment. But I do believe that there is still what we could call structural racism, which is this sort of notion where the structures of our societies, like the neighborhoods that were zoned in a particular era when black people were only allowed to live in certain places, and this was enforced rigidly for a while, and then also enforced not so rigidly. Like, banks wouldn't give out, loans to black families to live in certain areas or whatever. These things did happen. They don't really happen anymore, but there is the historical legacy of those things happening. And I mean, they do happen to a certain degree. There are landlords that specialize in trying to get a bunch of white people to live in a neighborhood because it will make the property go up in value if it's a white looking neighborhood. That's just how things are. But that's a little bit more of a social thing. Like, it's hard to really stop that from happening because it racially zoned neighborhoods, that could safely be called structural racism. And similarly, you could call the wealth distribution, the wealth disparity between black and white families, you could call that structural racism, or I don't know, racism. That's that's not an appropriate term. No, I take that back. See, this is why it's the Sunday Ramble and it's not one of my videos. I'm thinking out loud. You absolutely couldn't call wealth disparity and wealth distribution racism by any means, even though SJWs try to. They constantly try to. So you could, but you couldn't. It's just how things are. Some families have a lot of money. Some families have a lot of investments, and they give money to their children and invest in their children's future and give loans to their children. And it's really, how could you possibly do anything about that? I don't know. I don't have all this money, and even if I did, if I was a mega billionaire, would I set my mind to try to make sure that the other billionaires had less money? I mean, I think that there's at least one billionaire that does that. His name is George Soros. I'm pretty sure he likes to do things like that, from what I've heard. That being said, I had a concise line for this. In terms of, how do we get racial equality, or if some people want equity, how do we get a world where people of different skin colors are thriving at a fairly similar rate? Like, whatever this fair outcome is that people want. And I'm not, necessarily against it. I haven't molded over philosophically in my head to the point where I feel like I want to even say that I want equality, or I want equality of opportunity. Certainly, everybody should get a fair chance to do something. But what level of equality of outcome do I want? I obviously don't want a forced equality of outcome, because that doesn't make sense and it doesn't work. But where does the equality of outcome that I would prefer mixed with equality of opportunity for everybody, where's the happy medium? And that's where I don't really know. That being said, anybody who's trying to enact social justice by systemic changes, people who are advocating for equity on university campuses and these types of things, what I want them to know is everything that's easy to change, you've already changed. And everything that's hard to change will always be hard to change. And if you think that you're going to achieve your goals with the things that you're advocating for, which are the things that are easy to change, affirmative action and things like functional black supremacy on Evergreen College. Like, you go to Evergreen and there's this administration that's basically black supremacists, even though a lot of them aren't even black. It's this very odd thing. Those things can happen, and those are relatively easy things to change, because Evergreen is a small school and you can get it to be like that, and you can think that you're going to make a difference, blah, blah, blah. Like, you can think that. But ultimately, I don't think that that's really going to have much of a dent on the mega wealthy. You know, you're not going to actually shift the goalposts of wealth distribution. And what's going to happen is the things that are easy to change, you know, like these affirmative action quotas and the social climate that makes it so that white people are afraid to ever have opinions ever. Well, those things will just change back to the way they were, and white people will resent you. They'll say, oh, screw you. We changed things to how you wanted them for a while, and we didn't like it that way. And now we're going to go back to being selfish white people. Ha. Because we can do that. So that's, if the message that I'm trying to get through to you, if that's unclear, I don't know how to make it more clear. So moving on to the next item, I've already started to touch upon this, is communism and social justice, and how supposedly, according to some people that I know on Twitter, the anti-SJW type content is scraping the bottom of the barrel and people aren't really talking about things anymore. And a lot of people have been saying this for a while. I don't think that that's necessarily true. I think that the easy stuff is not so readily available, but the hard stuff is definitely still there. And I guess this is what separates the men from the boys. If you want to be a man, now, you can still make videos. I mean, I still watch Benjamin Boyce frequently. He goes through academic papers, academic letters written amongst faculty at universities where they're having these massive crises of Marxist professors power tripping and Marxist administrators being insane on the adjunct professors, and, you know, certain people like Brett Weinstein rebel against this. This is a major, major battle for the institutions, the actual things that matter in our nation that, you know, people still take seriously. Universities. And then they should. There's good things to be taught at a university. There's good things to learn in a classroom setting. You know, it's as much as you can learn from a video tutorial about, say, learning a computer program, it's so much better to have somebody in person leaning over your shoulder showing you how to do Photoshop than it is to have to, like, here's an intro to Photoshop video with some guy with a really thick Indian accent. I mean, which would you actually prefer? Honestly. So we can't just act like we should just give up on the institutional education, because I don't necessarily think that we should. But there's a major battle going on in it. But if you're gonna make videos about this, you have to actually learn the language. You have to be able to speak in that vernacular. You have to start reading. You have to start watching certain types of videos. I think that Sargon does a good job. I think that V does a pretty good job. And like I mentioned, Benjamin Boyce. I also listen to Janice Fiamengo. These are people that, you know, some of these people are a little bit more entertaining than others. Janice Fiamengo is well aware that she's not the most entertaining person, and it's become a part of her shtick. But she's very, very smart, and the information that's in her videos are really actually very good and worth watching. You know, I fancy myself as somebody who's probably a little bit more entertaining than I am intellectually enriching overall, though that goes back and forth. That's just, you know, my style of content. Recently, actually, really over the past, ever since I stopped drinking, I rethought things, I've been a little bit more stale, a little bit more informative, and a little bit less entertaining, because I thought about it and it's like, okay, largely the pop cultural zeitgeist in terms of anti-SJWs versus SJWs, the anti-SJWs won. The people that said, okay, this is stupid, culturally they won. It's become uncool to be an SJW. The SJWs don't necessarily know it yet. that's what always happens, but that's what happened. Sorry, there's sirens going on in the background. But oh my god, the SJWs are used to being not cool. That's what people forget. Like, I grew up in Seattle, and those people, there was a lot of them in the 1990s. We generally called them PC lesbians, and they really were, they didn't care about being cool so much. They cared about power tripping over activist organizations and academia. They cared about trying to become teachers and trying to indoctrinate students. Maybe you care about being cool, but these people don't care about being cool. And they will come up with weird ways of infiltrating corporations like YouTube and apparently video games and, you know, everything that you love. They will get a hold of and try to force you to be a communist or whatever. They're licking their wounds. They are re-strategizing. They still have the institutional power. They still are the establishment in so many of the facets of our culture and business and, you know, education, media. These people still do have a massive amount of power, and they are motivated not by whether or not they are temporarily popular. They are playing a long game, even if you aren't. So even if you think it's boring to talk about them, which that's fine if you think it's boring, I don't. I've seen these people go away and reemerge 10 times as bad as when they were there last time. You know, the way that SJW Marxist people are this decade is 10 times as bad as they were in the 90s. I mean, I found them in the 1990s because I was in the city of Seattle and I went to a far leftist high school. And so, you know, it's not like I never encountered these people, but there were very few of them. Well, now there's a lot of them. It's very widespread. It's very mainstream. And yeah, they might have lost the argument in the public eye, but they will try to come up with a different strategy to take over the entire world, because that's what they do. That's what the ultimate end goal of communism is, to have an entire world that is communist. It's how these people think. So if you're thinking in your head that you can just go ahead and give up and move on and blah, 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 that's, I guess, what you can do. But there's all sorts of different ways to keep talking about this. I plan on personally, I'm branching out on some side projects that are in the works that I don't want to talk about too much. But there's other stuff that you can do. So you guys, it's not over. Don't think of it like that. You know, until we have a new video sharing platform that has clear rules about like what rules you can't break to get demonetized or get a hate speech strike and blah, 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 blah. It's not over. Susan Wojcicki controls everything that I say to a certain degree. I have to constantly watch how I talk because of intersectional feminist communists. You know, I mean, Susan Wojcicki probably wouldn't say she's a communist, but ultimately, I bet she also doesn't really think that communism is that bad, as far as I know. I mean, she's a feminist, right? If you actually look into the origin of feminism. Oh, and by the way, yeah, I haven't been, I've been slacking on a few videos. One of them is the, I really want to make this video, and it's going to be good. It's called Intersectional Feminism is Communist Particle Board. And it talks about the way that intersectional feminism really just is communism, especially if you look into the roots of where intersectional feminism came from and all the different groups that led to the evolution of it. They're all communists. And I'm not just sort of saying that. Like, the feminists will admit that. So that's interesting. I need to make the video about the radical fairies and communism too. And I also need to make a video talking about how current communists are really just, it's like some weird religious snake oil salesman thing where they are honestly, the only thing that they're doing at this point is making promises to the masses for political purposes to get votes. And the people who are willing to do that, I think very likely know that they're doing it. Like, I don't think that these people ever think that there's actually going to be communism. I think that they don't care. I think that they're just telling people what they want to hear to advance their own political careers. That's just a theory, and I need to make a whole video about that. That being said, no one will watch them. People used to watch my videos, and people still want to. I know that a lot of people do. They get unsubscribed from my channel repeatedly. They don't get notifications for my videos. And even if they do, then it's not like they're showing up on their YouTube homepage and, you know, or their recommended section. So if you're like me and you have well over 100 subscriptions, then it's going to be really, really hard to see the content that you really want to watch. Like, you have those 1 or 2 channels that you watch religiously. Well, unless I'm one of those, it's very likely that you're going to forget about my videos. So, woe is me. But this brings me to the last thing that I was talking about. I want to start speaking about this weird thing that's happening, but I don't know how to talk about it exactly on YouTube because it makes me nervous to talk about. And I'll explain exactly why. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but I certainly have been noticing there's this weird new rise of popularity of 2 types of channels, and they are directly in opposition to each other. And I don't believe that either of these types of channels are actually that popular, because neither of them are very good at all, but suddenly everybody's watching them. Meanwhile, nobody's actually talking about them. Like, you know, so the 2 types of channels are alt-right channels that I'm not going to name, and some of them say some pretty ridiculous things, like very, very oddly, like it's almost as if they're a Poe, you know, not necessarily so much the stuff that they say currently, but if you go through their older videos and look at the stuff that they say, it's like blatant endorsement of violence and stuff. I don't know how to say it without sounding like a, because I don't want to say what they actually say, and I don't want to, I can't talk about it without sounding like a stupid Valley girl. Like, oh my god, some of the stuff on the old videos is like, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. But that is kind of what it's like if you look at these. And but oh, these channels are wildly popular. They're wildly popular. And then do you know who else is really popular? A new breed of leftists who aren't full-blown embarrassing bedroom feminists. They've evolved into what we have now, which is, I guess, H Bomber Guy, ContraPoints, 3 Arrows, and there's a few others, Philosophy Tube, and I think Innuendo Studios. Innuendo Studios is, I think he's a straight guy, and he was talking about how the Stonewall riots were led by black and trans women of color, and I think he's a straight guy. I asked him on Twitter just because I wanted to know if he's a straight guy getting gay history wrong. I just wanted to correct him, and he like refused to talk to me because these guys won't even talk to you. Like, he wouldn't even say if he was gay. He wouldn't say, oh, sorry, I guess I got that wrong, and look at, you know, the video where I explained to him where it's wrong. He wouldn't do any of that. ContraPoints won't talk to anyone. I don't know what 3 Arrows deal is. Out of all of them, in looking at their videos, 3 Arrows seems to be the most intelligent, but he's extraordinarily intellectually dishonest. Like, he'll make entire videos about one thing that Jordan Peterson or Sargon said in context, you know, because Jordan Peterson and Sargon talk a lot. They will just ramble and ramble and ramble like I'm doing right here. Each of them separately. They're a little bit more eloquent than I am, and they probably choose their words a little bit more carefully than I do, at least by now, on account of the fact that they are talking live so often. And they say stuff that maybe they might want to qualify later why exactly they said it. Well, Three Arrows will take this one little clip and then make an entire video trying to sort of debunk it. But what he's really doing is, what it seems like to me, what he's really doing is trying to offer the audience the promise that he's smarter than Jordan Peterson and Sargon. He's saying, listen to me. Don't listen to Peterson or Sargon. Listen to me. And ContraPoints kind of does the same thing. ContraPoints is so insistent that Contra is really, really smart. And I don't think that Contra admits to being some sort of full-blown communist. And Three Arrows actually says explicitly, of course, I'm obviously not a communist, but I don't... It's funny that he had to say, of course, I'm obviously not a communist, because I am not sure about that, of course. You know? Like, where... Really? Are you sure you're not? Because it does seem like you're probably a Marxist. But hey, if you want to make a video where you, and maybe you do have this video. I only watched the Three Arrows video, a few of them. And maybe there is one where he explicitly explains his political leanings. I don't know. I haven't looked, but it does seem to be very communist. But what I really wanted to talk about here is that these two types of channels are being seemingly propped up, because I'm not subscribed to any of them. I would not give a subscription to either of these types of channels, these alt-right ones that I don't want to name, or, you know, ContraPoints, Innuendo Studios, Three Arrows, H-Bomber Guy. I'm not subscribed to them. I don't think that they're cool. I don't like their videos. I don't think that they're entertaining. I don't think that they're very smart. I think that they are semi-intelligent people that have fallen into traps of sophistry due to being very obedient to authoritarianism. I think that they have probably been pretty good at pleasing teachers. You know, the philosophy tube guy's pretty cute. Wish he would please me. I'm joking, actually. He is cute though. He's not my type. I would make out with the philosophy tube guy, but I don't think that these people are what people actually want to see. We are living in the era of YouTube drastically meddling with your subscriptions. Like, they are trying desperately, tooth and nail, to control what you see on YouTube. And all of a sudden, the two things that are really, really popular are the alt-right and the commies, who promise you that they're not actually commies, but they certainly attack capitalism and stick up for Marxist principles. It just sort of seems to me as if the audience, you know, everybody, and the audience, when I speak of the audience, I include myself in this. It's like YouTube is trying to give the audience the impression that there's these two warring factions of popular channels that are now sprouting up. One is the alt-right, and if you actually investigate what they say, there is some kind of wacky stuff in it. And then there's the nice, cool communists that are much better. That are much better. So naturally, the audience is supposed to side with the communists, right? Right? And I've been making this prediction for a while that you know, this whole Antifa versus the alt-right narrative that we've been sold was just going to get bigger and bigger, as if it was a calculated narrative that actually was largely non-existent and was mostly just media hype and, you know, potentially paid protesters and people who are paid to do things on the internet to make it look like there's more numbers. And it's funny the way that my prediction, that's what it looks like. You know, it's adding more evidence to what it seemed like it was gonna evolve into. So yeah, don't watch these types of videos. Watch my videos instead. I'll have a new scripted one soon. I hope that this one wasn't too rambly. Bye.